What is up, people? It is me, Monster58, and welcome back to another video. Today is going to be a different kind of video because today I'm going to be doing my first video, I think, doing something like this. But today we are going to be doing my reactions, my thoughts, my sort of mini review, as many as I can possibly make it, regarding the recently released movie Transformers 1. As a Transformers reviewer, as someone who talks about pretty much Transformers most of the time on their social media and posts about it, collects reviews, figures, I feel I'm kind of obligated to probably give my thoughts on this whole movie as a whole, right? As well, in comparison to just not just doing the figure reviews and stuff like that, right? I knew I was looking forward to this movie, so I was really excited going into it. And so, a few disclaimers. First things first, this is my first time doing a video like this, so my apologies if everything is all over the place. And second off, this is my opinion. You are free to disagree with me and everything like that. You have your own opinion, and I completely respect that. So I don't want to get into arguments or anything like that. Don't need to get into arguments or anything like that. Just genuine discussion about the movie. And so with that all out of the way, I want to split this video as best I can into a non-spoiler section at the beginning and a spoiler section at the back. Basically, my spoiler section is sort of going to be elaborating on parts in the beginning, in the not spoiler section. So I hope that's you'll be able to follow that as best you can. And I'll try and make this easier to follow. But again, apologies if it's a bit all over the place. Before we even get into the not spoiler section, just the not spoiler, I guess, review, if you want to call it. This is a movie, if you're a Transformers fan, I definitely recommend watching. And even if you're not a Transformers fan, I think there's stuff to like here. It's just there's things in this movie I wish were done a bit better personally. But overall, I did enjoy the movie. If you're a Transformers fan, you will really, really enjoy this, in my opinion. So go out and see it if you are. If you don't, give it a try. But I do think that for some people, it'll be hit or miss. So without further ado, let's get into my mini review, and I'll try and make this as quick as possible. So, let's get this out of the way. The visuals, animations, sound, and soundtrack. All really good stuff. The visuals really made you felt like you're on a robotic planet, and I really, really loved it with a mix of the organic. You see that in the trailers, right? I'm not going to say anything that hasn't been shown in the trailers, right? But you see the sort of what's on the landscape of Cybertron with like sort of the organic life, which is pretty cool to see, right? And mixing with some of the mechanical of the Cybertronians, right? So that's really cool. Again, the Cybertron that we really see is really, it feels really good, right? Like it feels like a Transformers world, and that's absolutely fantastic. Sound design is also really good. The blasting sounds, the punching sounds, the kicking sounds, the explosions, the transformation, everything like that in this movie in terms of sound design, I think was really, really well done. There was nothing that really annoyed me or anything like that. And I thought it was really, really cool. Like nice little details. You see a lot of nice little details too. And finally, the soundtrack. There was never a song in this that I didn't enjoy. I mean, like there was never a song mainly I didn't ever get annoyed by. Soundtrack was perfectly fine, and I think they did a fine job with that as well. So getting into it. Obviously, the main crux of this movie is going to be the story. So what does the story surround? Well, essentially the story surrounds Orion Pax and D16. These guys are mining robots, mining Transformers, and it's their sort of goal and, not really goal, but sort of crux to be more than meets the eye, not trying to make a funny joke, but that's the whole thing of the movie, and obviously the big one is best friendship. And essentially throughout this movie, you get to see how Orion Pax, who eventually becomes Optimus Prime, you've known that through countless iterations of Transformers, and D16, who eventually becomes Megatron, end up starting off as best friends, and throughout their movie and throughout the movie and throughout their travels end up being at odds with each other and, being at each other's throats. And I think that the way that this movie is done is really, really cool. But for me, the issue I had is the first third of the movie didn't necessarily pull me as deep in as I expected it to. And for me, it's really where the 2/3 of the movie picks up. And that's where this movie, I think, becomes incredibly fun and incredibly good. I really did like the other 2/3 of this movie much more than I liked the first. Because I think that the first act is it's quick. There's a lot that's happening. It was a little too fast-paced in certain aspects, in my opinion. And I also think that I don't know. I just didn't feel like the pacing was all there, and it was just so fast. And there's something else you'll see, which I'll talk about, is that when there's a theme in the movie, and I really dislike it when movies do this, and there's a clear theme that this movie has, and the characters blatantly state what the theme is, or and what one of the central parts of the story is going to be, and then they repeat it over and over and over again. And that happens in this movie, and I'll talk about that in the not in the spoiler section, because to me, it's just like, you've said it once, guys. I understand you've said it once. We don't need to say it again like multiple times. We get it. We understand. I don't need that, right? And I get that it's also marketed towards kids, and I also get it's marketed, also a bit towards the adults like me, or much older, that watch the original, like, Generation 1 cartoon. But still, I don't think it needs to be repeated more than maybe once or twice. I think once you get past 2 times, once is fine, 2 is okay, and then when you get to 3 plus, that's when I'm like, okay, we don't need to hear it anymore. Okay, so with that, the first act, again, really wasn't, in my opinion, the part that drew me in as much. It was really when you start to hit towards the second and third act that this movie is really good. So let's quickly talk about each of the individual actor and actress performances, I think. Very quickly, Steve Buscemi as Starscream, really, really good. Has that really high-pitched, sort of screechy, like, very, like, Starscreamy voice that you would expect. Next is Keegan-Michael Key as Bumblebee, and although I'm fine with Keegan-Michael Key, I am not a fan of Bumblebee in this movie, and you can totally disagree with me on that. I totally understand if you did enjoy Bumblebee, but for him being used as the comedic relief character, there's a lot of moments where he makes jokes personally that don't hit for me. I know there's a lot of people who did enjoy the jokes, and if you did enjoy the jokes, that's awesome, and I'm happy for you they enjoyed them. I personally didn't really enjoy the jokes or find them all that funny, and for me, he just became a very annoying character, and you'll see that the movie kind of addresses that he's the annoying character, but for me, the issue that I have is that they treat Bumblebee like an idiot, and for me, that's an issue, and the reason it's an issue for me is because although Bumblebee in the original cartoon in the G1 as well as other continuities, Bumblebee is perfectly fine. Like, he is a fun, happy, joyous character, right? That's how his character is, and he'll put the hammer down when it needs to be put down. But in this movie, they don't do that character justice. He's not an idiot in the other continuities, and here he very much is just stupid. And that's also due to how his character is introduced and sort of his backstory, but at the same time, I just don't like how they characterize Bumblebee in this movie. I think that Keegan-Michael Key's performance was perfectly fine. I just think that the character itself that they put as Bumblebee in this movie, I just did not like. ScarJo as Alita 1. I really liked her. There's a couple moments. There's a scene in particular where I find her personality a tad overbearing to me, and I think it's a little too exaggerated, I guess is how I would describe it. She became too much for me in like one scene in particular that I just really didn't like, and I don't think it was necessary. But I did like her performance a lot as Alita 1. She really has this edginess. She has this very much, obviously she's her own, right? And it's a very empowering female character. I really do like her character. It's just there's a couple moments where I feel that her personality is a bit overbearing, and there's one scene I'll talk about in the spoiler section that I just did not need this. Like, there's couple voice lines she says, I'm like, I don't need that. We don't need that right now. Like, there was the other moments in the movie where it's perfectly fine. Here, I just don't need it. Next, Chris Hemsworth as Orion Pax / Optimus Prime. Absolute standout performance here. One of the standouts of this movie. Absolutely fantastic. I think he did a really, really good job here as Orion Pax / Optimus Prime. Although you can still hear Chris Hemsworth in there a little bit, and you can still hear Thor. I obviously will never not be able to hear Thor, and I'm sure many of you will also understand that as well. When it comes to that, I'm so happy that I found out that Chris Hemsworth really consulted Peter Cullen on this and really made me realize that, oh, he's really serious about this. Overall, really good performance from him, and really good sort of transitioning from Orion Pax and sort of starting to really mature and then getting to that Optimus Prime part. Finally, in my opinion, the best performance of this movie, Brian Tyree Henry as Megatron. Absolute D16 in Megatron. Absolutely fantastic. Really starts off with this sort of very much by the books, very much like, but still very friendly Transformer, and then throughout the movie progressively gets more and more power hungry, and you'll see how he does that, and eventually he becomes Megatron, and it's so cool. I really like his performance, and I think he absolutely nailed it. One other standout performance that I really did enjoy that I'll throw out here, Lawrence Fishburne as Alpha Trion. That was a really, really, really cool performance. I think he did a fantastic job playing the old Transformer, playing an old, very elderly Transformer from a long begotten time. I think that was an absolute standout. And there's a couple other characters I would talk about, and their performances were also good. But at the same time, I don't think they were necessarily in terms of their names revealed in the trailers, so I'd rather just leave that to the spoiler section. But overall, when it comes to this movie, I do recommend you go see it as a Transformers fan. As a not Transformers fan, I still would probably recommend you go see it. The animation's beautiful, soundtrack is amazing, and everything like that. You see lots of little details and things, and if you're a Transformers fan, lots of amazing cameos as well. But I think that by the end of this movie, I was very satisfied. Like, I was satisfied at the end. Like, I think, like, that was my main reason that I also did enjoy this, is because at the end it was like, what a nice ending, right? Like, what a great ending, and for me as a fan, I was very satisfied, and even if I'm thinking of it as like a critic hat, I was very satisfied. Now, when I'm giving this a score, I'll give it a 4 out of 5 as a Transformers fan, but if I had to put like a critic hat on, probably like a 3 or 3.5 if I had to like maybe nitpick or like really think about certain aspects of this movie. But overall, I did still really enjoy it, and it is still a recommendation for me, regardless if you're a Transformers fan or not. Alrighty, let's get into the spoiler section. Now, when it comes to the sound, the visuals, everything like that stuff, I'm not going to elaborate on that really, because that doesn't need to be really touched on in too much of a sense. But essentially, that first third of the movie, the reason I find it so fast-paced is because, and the other issues I have, is in that first act, we get established that Orion is essentially, they kind of do a nice twist on him being like a librarian, and they essentially make him so that he's scavenging for records, because it's sort of established that their leader, Sentinel Prime, is searching for the Matrix of Leadership. And the reason he's searching for the Matrix of Leadership is because without the Matrix of Leadership, Energon does not flow freely throughout Cybertron, meaning that they have to mine for it. You also find out very quickly that both D16 and Orion are born without TCOGs, and you also find out that Orion is scavenging for these like records to find out what the Matrix is, because he wants to do the thing called more than meets the eye. Right? He wants to be more than they were made out to be, which is mining robots. And then you start to find out that Orion has been known to do stuff like this, like sort of seen as mischievous. You see a bunch of these other Transformers sort of say, "Oh, there goes Orion again," right? And then sort of you see the generals, like the I guess like the mining generals. His name is Darkwing. He has that purple visor in the trailers. That guy is always up Orion's butt, right? He doesn't like him. He thinks of all the mining Transformers as sort of lower than him, all that stuff like that. And so you get this sense of you do feel bad for them, but what ends up happening is you do see this really cool, dynamic between D16 and Orion, that they are best friends and everything like that, and that Orion himself wants to be more than meets the eye. But you start to see where D16 and Orion have a bit of a divide between them, is that D16's like, "No, dude, just let's play by the books. Let's just keep doing our lives as is." And Orion's like, "No, man. If I can find the Matrix of Leadership, we could be more. We could maybe do stuff, right?" And D16's like, "Nah, man. Let's just chill out for a second." But you also get this thing established at the beginning of the movie where they put like was it D16 has, sorry, Orion gives D16 like a Megatronus sticker, who's like the strongest of the primes, and it's sort of also established at the beginning that it was the primes who obviously were the first Transformers that Primus created. You get to see Primus too, which is really, really cool. But they all perished in a battle against the Quintessons, right? But this whole thing, so eventually they get to a point where like they keep saying like, "You're my best friend, I have your back," and then they also say Orion keeps saying we can be more than meets the eye. And I'm like, they said it once, and then they said it again. I'm like, okay, I get it. And then they said it like a third time for both of those messages. I'm like, guys, I don't need to hear it again. Like, you said it over and over again. I don't need to hear it. Show me that through your actions and not just saying it, right? So they're mining everything like this, and this is where you get introduced to Alita 1, and she's like this essentially like a mining lead. She's like a she's like a commander in the mines. And her and Orion have a contentious relationship because during one of their mining expeditions, Alita was like, "I'm going to get promoted," and then Orion blows up the mine because of something he mines. And then she gets pissed because Darkwing ends up firing her from her job and forces her to go to waste management. And what ends up happening is during this time, Sentinel Prime comes back, reports that he hasn't found the Matrix of Leadership on the surface of Cybertron, and he wants to hold this thing called the Icon 5000, which is essentially like a Velocitron thing. All of these events are happening in the first third of the movie, and for me, there's just a lot, and it's so fast-paced. I just don't like how quick everything is. I think that the idea of what they had was perfectly fine, but it just didn't draw me in as much as I wish it did. But I will say the visuals definitely kept me interested. It was really the visuals, the sound, and the actor and actress performances in this that really kept me interested. It's just the actual story and how it was paced just did not. I did not enjoy that first third of the movie as much as I wish I did. I think that it had issues, and again, that repeating of the More Than Meets the Eye and Best Friendship. I get it's marketed towards kids and they don't have as much of an attention span as an adult, but still, I think after saying it twice, it didn't need to be said again. So they eventually get in this race because Orion's like, if we can win against people who can actually transform, when we can't transform, then we will be, we can show the world that we're more than meets the eye. So eventually they do that, and this is where they meet Sentinel. So they end up getting like they get in first place for like half a second with those jetpacks that they strap on in the trailers. But then they end up getting past at the end. They end up knocking out Darkwing in like the process of trying to get to first. And then Sentinel comes in and he goes, "Hey, I really like what you guys did." And this is where you also get established that the general of his army is Arachnid. And this is where you start to see a little bit of like, what is really Sentinel, right? So eventually after this is where they meet Bumblebee, because they get sent down to Waste Management, because initially Sentinel's like, "Oh, you can meet with me," but then Darkwing finds them, throws them into Waste Management. And when they meet Bumblebee, this is where you find out Bumblebee is sort of like a Tom Hanks Castaway type character. He's been stuck in Waste Management for so long with no one to talk to that he made like fake friends, right? Like imaginary friends like Wilson, right? And because the whole crux of the movie is finding the Matrix, it so happens to be that one of the pieces that Bumblebee used to make one of his friends happens to be a distress call from Alpha Trion, giving coordinates to where supposedly that last fight with the Quintessons happened, when all of the Primes passed away and got killed, right? They got killed in that. And so they eventually were like, we have to find this, we have to do this, and we know one person who can drive a train, and that's Elita 1, so they have to get to the surface. They find Elita 1, and in this scene, when they're meeting with Bumblebee, he does like that badassatron joke, and then he's just annoying. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. The character was just annoying, and they blatantly address it. Like, they get to the surface, and the reason I find Bumblebee so annoying is because they get to the surface, and then they're like going, and the leader one's like, "I'm leading, because if you lead me again into another nothing, you're good. I'll have your head," type thing, right? So Alita's like, "I'm leading," all right. So she starts to lead, and Bumblebee introduces himself to her, and then he does like that badassatron thing joke 3 times in a row, and at that point she goes like, "I'm gonna need you to stop talking," and in my head I'm like, that should have happened, and that joke never needed to happen. Like, I get it's for the kids, but man, it just made me not like Bumblebee already more than I didn't like him at the beginning of the movie, when he got introduced into it. But this act, so essentially they find where the Primes died, they find their bodies, they find where Zeta Prime died, all these other Primes, they find Megatronus' body, they find Alpha Trion, who actually is he's not dead, he's actually in stasis, so they revive him quick, and Alpha Trion actually tells them the story on how Sentinel Prime worked for the Primes as like an informant, told them that he had information, told all the Primes to meet up at this location. They got attacked by the Quintessons, and just before they were about to beat the Quintessons, all the Primes end up getting killed by Sentinel in that preceding fight. And besides, obviously, Alpha Trion. And so they all get killed, and then what you'll find out something later. Essentially, Alpha Trion also reveals that all Transformers are born with cogs, and unfortunately, Sentinel removed them all because he's forcing you guys to essentially pay his debt back, because he made a deal with the Quintessons, which, by the way, the Quintessons ship looks really cool. I'm not going to lie to you. Although I wish they did more with the Quintessons. That's also another criticism I have, is they didn't do too much with them besides establishing that they were the ones that made the deal with Sentinel, and that they are the actual true enemy, besides Sentinel actually being the enemy of this, the villain of this movie. And this is where D16 says that his entire life is a lie. He did everything that he was asked to do by the book, and his entire life was a lie, right? So Alpha Trion gives all of them T-Cogs from the Primes. They transform, they escape, and this is where they get to meet Starscream, because when they escape, they end up getting captured by Starscream and is getting the Elite Guard. And this was a really cool scene. I really like this scene where they, and this is where you see that Steve Buscemi, Starscream, and I really, really like it. And this is where you see that divide start to really go between D16 and Optimus is through this, D16 and Orion is through these few scenes. You start to see like he gets the power to transform, and then he gets the fusion cannon, and it's like, oh, like, I want to kill Sentinel. Like, he doesn't deserve to live for what he did to us and all of our comrades, right? Our mining friends. And Orion's like, whoa, we just need to expose him, because they ended up during this time, they also were able to record Sentinel meeting up with the Quintessons and giving away the Energon that they were mining, right? And so that's why D16 is so pissed. And that's a really, like, that's amazing motivation, in my opinion. I really like that motivation behind why D16 is getting so angry. But obviously, you see that divide where Orion's like, we can expose him, but we don't need to kill him. And D16 is like, no, we gotta kill him, right? Stay out of my way. And you start to see this divide, right, of these once best friends becoming bitter enemies. And eventually what happens is they in this meeting, D16 ends up beating the piss out of Starscream. And he sort of becomes like a de facto leader, because these Elite Guard is what they're called. They were once Elite Guard to Sentinel. They betrayed Sentinel, and they're doing everything they can to stop Sentinel. You start to see that this is where Megatron starts to become Megatron, right? Where D16 starts to become him. And so, because he's like, these are clearly very anarchist characters, all the Seekers, right? And it's really, really cool visual scene. They then get attacked by Sentinel and Arachnid. Half of the Elite Guard gets captured, including D16 and Bumblebee. And this is the scene I was talking about with Elita 1 that was overbearing. Like, they're all like recovering from the attack, all the remaining Transformers. So Soundwave, Shockwave, Elita 1, Orion, and all of the other Seekers that were left, the Elite Guard. And she sits down and she basically goes like, hey, she's like trying to, it's like a pep talk for Orion. And she says, I just want you to know I'm better than you at everything. And I'm like, why do we have to say this? Like, I get it's for comedic relief, but we don't need that. And then she actually goes on to say what she should have just said to start off with. I didn't need that to just enhance her character. I already get her character at that point. And then she goes, it's your optimism for the future, to be able to view a brighter future than anyone else can, that makes you great, right? And I was like, that's cool. I do like that. It's just that line before, why do you need to say that? I don't need you to say that, right? So goes back to the scene where it goes to a scene now where they're essentially have to plot. They gather all the troops up, the remaining Elite Guard and Shockwave and Soundwave, and that was a really nice scene. I thought there was a nice funny moment in there where like Shockwave is clearly scared of Elita 1, and Elita like pumps her fists together and she's like, you better join, and I'm leading, and he's like, we're not leading you or something, you're not leading us or something, and Alita like is like, you better, and he's like, yeah, you are leading us, right? So I did like that scene. And so it cuts to a scene where all the Elite Guard are captured, D16. Long story short, he stands up to Sentinel. Sentinel doesn't like that, pushes him down, notices he has a Megatronus sticker on, and then decides to carve it into his chest, like essentially like burn it into his chest. And that's the first inklings of the Decepticon logo that you see, which is really freaking cool. You get to see that origin. And then he ends up finding out that he's like, you like Megatronus? I stole his T-Cog. And then he opens his chest and then the Megatronus cog is in there. So eventually they attack the tower, Orion, and then D16 gets free, and then he starts to tussle with Sentinel, and he is actually beating the piss out of Sentinel at this point, right? They're beating the piss out of each other. D16 has the upper hand. And eventually they get launched onto like top of one of the towers, and this is also where they reveal to the entire world, like that recording, that Sentinel is actually a complete joke and he's been forcing people to work, and you see all of the workers get pissed off, which is really cool as well. And all of this time, I really love the interactions, everything like that, the voice lines that they're doing. I think they're doing a really good job. Again, for me, it's just except for Bumblebee. I think all of the people who did voice acting in this movie did a fantastic job in that 2/3, and like that was so good. This 2/3 of the movie is fantastic, and I really, really loved all these interactions during these cool scenes that they have. And finally, it gets to a point where they're fighting. Sentinel and D16 are fighting. And he gets the fusion cannon, is about to kill Sentinel. Orion jumps. He's like, "No, dude, we already exposed him. We don't need to actually kill him. Just capture him." And then he's like, "Get out of my way, or I'll make you get out of my way." Essentially, something like that. He pushes Orion out of the way, and then he goes to shoot Sentinel. And then Orion jumps back in front of his way, and then gets shot and killed. And then so D16 feels remorseful for like a few minutes. He like grabs like Orion before he falls into the endless abyss. And throughout this progression, you start to see D16's eyes go from orange to yellow to orange to deeper orange, and then finally here he's like, "No, I'm done helping you." And then he looks up and his eyes are completely beet red. Lets Orion fall to his death. Everyone's shocked. Goes up to Sentinel, and I'm not joking you, rips Sentinel in half, and then he takes the T-Cog and puts it in his own chest, and replaces it with the one he had, and becomes Megatron. And that whole scene was fantastic. I love that scene. The voice lines, the visuals, the music, everything there was fantastic. Orion falls into the abyss. And just like in most Transformers continuities, the Matrix of Leadership is not found, it is earned, and so the Primes bestow upon Orion the Matrix of Leadership, and he becomes Optimus Prime, launches himself back up, and then him and Megatron have their first official fight. That's the scenes in the trailer where you see we could have built this world together, or whatever he says. And so they end up scuffling. Optimus Prime ends up coming up on top. And then this is where you see them exile the Elite Guard as well as Megatron, right? At that time, or D16 still. And so, and you see when Optimus Prime comes back up, you see D16 go, "They gave the Matrix to you? Like, you of all people, they gave it to you." And so that whole scene, and I love to see that that's how you see this is how the Decepticons are formed. This is how the Autobots are formed, right? And so the end of the movie is ends up saying this is how we are Autobots. I don't remember exactly the other part of the line, but they established that there. Bumblebee and Elita 1 obviously end up working together here. And they end up becoming obviously part of Optimus Prime's Autobots. And so the scene and the ending scenes of this movie were very satisfying, very cool. You get to see the post-credit scene where the Decepticons are officially formed. So very, very cool stuff. And again, their performances, the visuals, everything like that was really, really good. So, that's why it's just like I really found all of their performances, really except for Keegan-Michael Key's Bumblebee, really good. I mean, he performed the annoying character fantastically. I just didn't like the characterization of Bumblebee. And throughout the movie, you think that they would have him mature, but he still cracks like these one-liners. Like in the scene when they're captured in Sentinel's tower, that's the only scene where he's actually genuinely mature. I think he has like, "D16, don't get up, just don't get up, bro. We just gotta stay here, man." And that's where D16 stands up to Sentinel instead of listening to Bumblebee. That's like the only scene where Bumblebee's actually like mature, in my opinion. So overall, still really found it fun. Again, 4 out of 5. Recommend you go see as a Transformers fan. Interested in general, but again, you might be hit or miss on it. Just depends, but I still think it's a very enjoyable movie, especially from a visual performance standpoint. I think visual standpoint, sound, everything like that. So yeah, overall, I'm sorry this video went a bit longer than expected, but I think that's about it for the review. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this movie in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys thought of it as Transformers fans or not Transformers fans. Be cool to hear. So, I thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video. Please like, comment, rate, and subscribe, and share this video with your friends. And also follow me in the socials. Those will be linked in the description below. And with that, guys, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this movie review. And I'll catch you all in the next one. Hope you guys have a wonderful day. Peace.